Hello and welcome to Visible Voices. The Visible Project is a Leeds-based initiative aimed at improving the outcomes of adults that have experienced any form of child sexual abuse. The Visible Project is made up of two equally important groups. The Strategic Steering Group, which consists of both statutory and voluntary organisations within Leeds, and the Visible Leadership Reference Group. This podcast is by Visible Leadership Reference Group that consists of people who have experienced any form of child sexual abuse, otherwise known as CSA survivors. Names may or may not be used throughout this series. Following on from the last episode, we are speaking with a Visible member about some of the barriers to reporting CSA within a faith setting. We hope to return to this matter in future to look at how these barriers occur within non-Christian faiths.
I'm not Canadian. Everybody thinks I'm Canadian. I'm from New York via the Midwest. But Leeds is home now, and hopefully it'll continue to be home for a long time. You know, through all the counseling and medication and ups and downs I've had with depression and anxiety, I know who Rosemary is, and you know, as persons goes, Rosemary's not better or worse than anybody else. But one thing I do know, Rosemary tries. And I'm very proud of that. I try every day to be the best person that I can be that day. And sometimes it goes better than others, but that is why I'm at the place where I'm at. I'm so happy to say, you know, being a minister, being a chaplain, it is the profession that allows me to try to be the best person I can. There is no other profession that's going to ask that of you. And I feel like I've done some good work. And I've enjoyed working with Visible and with other groups in the city. As far as positive outcomes go, I mean, I feel a lot of calmness and peace around the way things are. But then I also feel like if I see something that just kind of doesn't sit with me the right way, you know, I really open my mouth and I let people know. And I think even if, you know, it's an overreaction, it's better to have the overreaction than no reaction sometimes. I think I am who I am. Like, I am Rosemary. Whether I'm invisible or whether I'm on the bus or whether I'm doing a sermon in front of a church, like I'm constantly the same person. Yes, we all put on personas, but I try to put on as little of a persona as I can. And you just, you know, you don't always succeed, but, you know, you do the best you can. You try the best you can, and then you move on.
You read a report before you came here in preparation for this podcast on child protection in religious organisations and settings, and you brought out some subheadings. Do you want to tell us why you pulled these out and what your thoughts were?
I just was astounded when I read the barriers that exist within religious communities to reporting on childhood sexual abuse. These barriers, I've experienced all of them in various ways. And so that really struck me that the governmental panel that put together this report, they really listened and took in important information. Some of this will be specific to religious settings, but some of it won't.
And you felt that these subheadings that we're about to read out individually basically synopsize your whole experience of your own personal abuse.
Yes, because growing up like I did in various different kinds of primarily Christian households, you know, I could never separate being part of the family with being part of a religious group. So when things broke down in the family, essentially my religious life also broke down. So there is a lot of crossover. But then there's also specific things that religious communities tend to be involved in that maybe wouldn't be so much outside of a faith community.
And so the first subheading is victim blaming, shame and honour.
I wasn't sexually abused by a person within a religious organization. I was sexually abused by my foster brother, who happened to be, we had a foster mother who was heavily involved in the church. My foster mother was secretary to the parish priest. And even though she wasn't a religious professional, the church was very important, even if she was just an office person. She felt like she had a role in this faith community that was very important to her. So she did the victim blaming. I felt a lot of shame because of it, but also her honor as a Catholic was at stake. And that is why I didn't receive the help that I needed at the time. So that was just tremendously difficult. And this becomes a real barrier to protecting children when you have victim blaming.
I think for me, the shame was the biggest part. It's a shame in all parts of every facet of your life. It's a shame to tell it to your parents. It's a shame to tell it to your friend.
Yeah.
It's a shame for it to come up in your mind.
Yeah.
The shame of it mid-conversation in a totally different setting, for it to pluck into your mind and impact on you. And not only is impact on your emotion or make you sort of more self-conscious in certain ways, the shame of when you do disclose, the response of other people when your first disclosure happens.
Did you have any of the shame about, as you were getting older and becoming an adult, you were ashamed of even growing up?
No, I was totally desensitized.
I had that. I had that real thing, because in America, you've got to go to the prom and be cheerleaders in high school and all this. And I just felt like so ashamed of the fact that here I was growing up, becoming older, that somehow I didn't deserve to become older and to go to the prom and all that. And yeah, it made things really difficult when I was going through puberty.
Yeah. Wow. In a way, it did actually, because I remember I was a tomboy.
Yeah.
And so I had the shame of developing into a woman,
Yeah.
And I did try to stop it, sort of, and stop by wearing baggy clothes and
Right.
cutting my hair short. And every time someone said, "Oh, are you a boy or a girl?" I'd be like, "Yeah, brilliant." They can't, but I know in hindsight, when I look back, it was to make me less sexy or less appealing. So the second subheading is approaches to discussions of sex, sexuality, and sexual abuse.
Yeah, that is such a big one, because for a long time in so many faith communities, it was like, you don't know what sex is until you get married.
Yeah.
And by then, quite frankly, it's too late, I think people need to have basic sexual education. Now, whether or not you engage in sexual activity, that is up to you and your morals. But understanding how the body works, how women get pregnant or don't get pregnant, I think is important for people to know. Unfortunately, there's this idea, if you know how things work, oh, you're going to go and do it. No, not necessarily.
It's interesting, because when I think of going back into sort of church, and I actually ran Sunday schools, or helped run Sunday school groups when I was young. And I remember, the idea of sexuality or sexual abuse, obviously, nothing, don't mention it. You'd never say that in a church. There was no connotation. So I'm assuming if someone was being sexually abused in a religious setting, it would be more suppressed.
Oh,
even
yeah.
as the word sex, or even,
Fortunately, it's gotten better in a lot of faith communities. Now you can say, there is a thing called sex. People have sex. It's how procreation happens or doesn't happen.
So the third subheading is the use of religious texts and beliefs.
The one that I think of, which isn't exactly about childhood sexual abuse, but really got to me with my Baptist foster parents is Proverbs. I don't remember the exact chapter and verse, but the verse says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child."
Yeah.
And that was just devastating to me because they actually hit me with a rod. And I think that was like the beginning of the end of me really feeling any kind of joy in a religious setting, because I just thought, well, if them beating me with a rod is, if God thinks that's okay, well, I don't like God then, because obviously it was terrible, absolutely hideous. And I really shut down after that. It wasn't specifically sexual, but on the other hand, it's the same kind of underlying thinking. And I don't, I can't quote all the various verses, but I'm sure most religious texts have verses that can be used against people that want to report sexual abuse. It's the whole idea that somehow you bring it upon yourself.
Mm.
And
And again,
it has to end.
And again, I suppose the use of religious texts and beliefs, it's a control mechanism again, isn't it? Okay, so the next one is distrust of external agencies, fear of external reporting, and reputational damage.
I think there is a real fear of outsiders, because if we mingle with outsiders, then we are not going to be a pure faith. And that keeps things from being reported. But on the other hand, if a child is being sexually abused, that is a crime, and that involves the government. And unfortunately, you have a duty to report things to the government. There's no way around it. And also pretending that, oh, by the way, it doesn't happen in our community. That doesn't work either. I think a lot of times they have meetings among themselves and they try to deal with things in their own internal way of dealing with things.
As in a religious group.
When it's a crime like that, you have to involve the state authorities.
I suppose any religious, any person who is an elder or a respected person, a significant person within a religious faith has, in a way, has a duty of care to be open and caring so that people can disclose, people can share information to prevent the abuse from continuing.
No matter what community it is, I want to believe, so I can sleep at night, that there are people of good faith, of good intention in all these various communities. And you just have to live in hope that these people that want to make their faith communities better will prevail. Sadly, sometimes they don't, but, given the millions of people, the billions of people that practice any kind of religious faith, you just have to live in hope. That's all.
The second to last one, the desire to manage allegations internally.
Well, again, that's like what I said, banishment, some other kind of penance is called for.
And the risk of a child not being believed, even if they did disclose, because if it's internal, there's no impartiality there. There's no sort of, it's already, it seems to me, it could potentially be deemed as an already done deal before you even open your mouth. So why bother even disclosure?
Well, that's true. I mean, by the way, an interesting situation, which we will see how it plays out. It's my understanding that Australia had a royal commission about childhood sexual abuse in religious organizations. Religious organizations that have not participated in that are going to have their tax exempt status removed. So the Australian government is taking a really strong approach on this and saying, okay, if you want to enjoy not paying taxes, then you have to participate in civil society. The more you can involve both men and women in whatever groups that you have for children, the better it's going to be. Like, one of the things that I think is just providing children with role models on how to be a good person, no matter what you look like, no matter what your age is. And the more that you can do things, and also some simple things too, which I forgot to mention, but like just if you're meeting with a child, not having the door closed, just making sure that things are more open and there's no risk of even something being misunderstood.
Transparency.
Exactly. And if you need to have privacy, then you need to invite another adult in so that, things are safer for everybody involved.
Like a GP.
Yeah. Or yeah.
If they were doing a gynecological examination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But also too, I firmly believe in women leading church groups and being in the pulpit and everything. I just briefly have to say I was in the Air Force as a chaplain candidate, and I experienced such terrible sex discrimination. I was basically told, "You're a woman, you shouldn't be here." But given the complicated nature of modern life, no, I wasn't going to walk away. Obviously, I'm needed here.
And last but not least, forgiveness.
Forgiveness. I always want to be the person that if somebody wants help and wants some kind of moral or spiritual guidance, I will be there to listen. Because that is, to me, the best part of how things are for me, is that I can use all these traumatic experiences and listen to other people's traumas and find something redeeming about it. Anger is always a secondary emotion. There's always another emotion underneath the anger. And I think forgiveness comes when you stop being angry and you examine the emotion underneath. Are you hurt? Are you ashamed? Are you sad? I mean, whatever that emotion is underneath, humiliated, do you feel cheated? When you can get to the emotion underneath the anger, that's when forgiveness can come. But also anger can propel people to do a lot of good activism. So my thing is, live the way that you think is best for you to live.
Thank you to our members for that discussion, and thank you for listening to Visible Voices. Please join us again next time. Toodle pip. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you found Visible Voices interesting, thought-provoking and helpful. Visible Voices was created and delivered by the Visible Leadership Reference Group. Special thanks to all those that contributed today. Western Studios Leeds Limited for facilitating the podcast. The music was produced by Mark Parvin, aka Marvin Parks. To find out more about the Visible Project, go to visibleproject.org.uk. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. If the content of this has affected you and you live in Leeds, please go to the child abuse subsection of the Mindwell website, mindwell-leeds.org.uk.